In this video, we're going to discuss the concept of the primary producer. More specifically is when you're doing a revenue projection on your marketing plan for your publisher product, or really any product in general, there's going to almost always be one thing that is going to account for the bulk of your revenue that you're going to generate. So this is the question I always think about. What assets are available internally? And how much do you think each can contribute to your revenue projection when intelligently combined together? The primary producer doesn't mean one singular thing. It's really what it means is combining intelligently many things to perform one act or one interaction with customers. So in a publisher-publishee model, this has specific importance because obviously if you're the publishee, you want the person to have these assets available, or at least one or two of them. Email is the most important usually, although other web properties that have mass communication abilities are powerful as well. So that's the first kind of consideration there. And if you're the publisher, then what you really want is somebody who has material that with one or more of these things intelligently combined together, one or more of these assets can have a big impact and make sales happen. So this is kind of funny because I said email, Facebook, web properties with mass communication abilities, retargeting, and so forth. Let me give you a very specific example. So when we first created Operation Physical Products, we had a Facebook group built around people that were very specifically into a certain way of selling on Amazon. So when we published that product, we went and targeted that audience. We also had them on an email list too. So sometimes we'd send them from email to Facebook, to the private Facebook group. And from there, we would take them to the sales mechanism, which in this case was a webinar, right? We also had retargeting, which we ran throughout this campaign. So when they landed on our checkout pages or any page where they were a specific type of Amazon customer that we had access to, we retargeted them with this offer, or retargeted them with this offer all over the web, right? So the primary producer in this particular case was this audience through email, Facebook, and retargeting communications to show them a webinar that explained to them the value of this offer. That was our primary producer. Every other technique that we would have done is secondary. So non-customers of Amazon, wouldn't have made sense, right? Other types of marketing, such as doing advertising to these people and the time frame given, didn't make so much sense as a primary producer. Now, it's not to say we didn't do those things, but we had isolated this as a consideration, a primary factor. What connections are available externally is a secondary consideration, or a second consideration that helps you on finding out what's the biggest thing that's going to move the needle. How can each party help influence these connections to get exposure and conversion? And this includes, is not limited to, but includes traditional channels, download and members areas, spillovers, integration, etc. So we combined even further still. When somebody would log into our members area, who was an existing Amazon customer, we would serve to them a pop-up to get them to come to the webinar. Also, when they would log into that members area, we'd set a tracking pixel so we could advertise and retarget to them on other channels as well to get them, of course, to go back to the webinar, right? It's not the only way of doing it. What you can do as well is you can say, listen, I'm good at this, you're good at that. I have these assets, you have those assets. So the thing that we think is going to move the most units, here's how we can combine all these assets together to get them to that thing that will put them in a position to say yes to the offer, to the product. So what connections are available externally and what assets are available internally, and how can we creatively combine those together? And so creatively combine those together and send the result through a vehicle that is going to pull in the most profits. And then how can we supercharge that? That's the whole process here. So based on the above, what vehicle is likely without optimization? And what I mean by that is not hundreds of rounds of split testing and hundreds of hours of toil and trouble. Like, what's something we could send them to that's only halfway decent that could still churn profit? Then how can we supercharge that? So then, once we put that in place, given the time frame involved, is there things that we could do to improve it even further? So in our particular case, we had figured out that based on the talent available between the publisher and the publishee, that a webinar made sense, especially with the relationship to the existing audience in that particular case. And then from that, we were able to integrate members areas, Facebook advertising, email list, and Facebook groups to send them through to a webinar that asked them to invest in the product that we had published. Now, in Tube Method, we did it a little bit differently, which is kind of interesting. We'll break that down here in a case study here. But this is an example of where we isolate that one thing that we can put assets around and connections together with to generate the biggest slice of revenue within our revenue projection. Then after that, we move on to secondary producers.